Now, I want to talk about the temptations in our time. And basically, I want to talk about bad diagnosis. Okay, so look, think about it. We have problems in the world. Do we have problems or do we have problems? There are a lot of problems. The trouble is, you may go to a doctor, for instance, and sometimes the doctor gets it wrong. The doctor gives you a wrong diagnosis. So what happens if the doctor gives you the wrong diagnosis? The cure doesn't work. Or in some cases, the cure may make you even sicker or even kill you, okay? It's pretty shocking. If you look at the number of deaths caused by medical malpractice, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. The same thing is true in our world today. There are people who claim to understand what's wrong in the world, but their prescriptions often make things worse, sometimes much worse. And that's what we're going to look at in this next section. The toxic ideologies that have led to massive suffering in the past and are rising up again in our world today. These are the satanic temptations on the worldwide level. America, I believe especially, we have to overcome. America, as Father said, is a providential nation. Right? We may not be the chosen nation, but we are a providential nation, for sure. So let's first talk about communism. Communism seeks to create an ideal world without individual portion of responsibility or ownership and without freedom. In North Korea, if you're discovered to be a Christian, there's a good chance you'll be executed and your family sent to a concentration camp. In China, if you don't belong to an approved state-controlled church, you risk being arrested, sent to a prison, work camp, or be organ harvested. Was Marx really an atheist, or was he a Satanist rebelling against God's sovereignty? Here's a poem that he wrote as a young man before he wrote any of his very famous, well-known works. So let's read this. The hellish vapors that rise and fill the brain till I go mad and my heart is utterly changed. See this sword, the prince of darkness sold it to me. For me he beats the time and gives the signs. Ever more broadly I play the dance of death. As you can see, Marx was obsessed with hatred, death, and destruction. And so were all of the famous communist leaders who put his ideas into practice. God did work through the Christian West, in Europe and in America, ideals of freedom and representative democracy and science and technology. These are things which have done a lot of good in the world, right? But I also realized and thinking, there are a lot of really, really, really bad ideas that came from Europe and even here in America too. And so that's kind of what we're struggling with, and that's what we have to deal with. If you think about it, it is sad that the human race needs the 10 Commandments, which means that our default is to worship a lot of false gods and even do evil things in the name of God. The 2 Kings book, Our Father Forsaken, makes it clear that we cannot abandon either the Old or the New Testament if we truly want to know and obey God. The founders of America knew both the Old and New Testaments very well, and that provided important guidance for our Constitution. But as America drifts away from biblical understanding and values, it increasingly profanes what should be holy. It fails to honor those we're indebted to. Acts of evil are rationalized by many in our universities. Modern ideologies teach that there's no truth or authority that needs to be honored and that it's justifiable to steal, covet, lie, and murder. To someone who doesn't understand the truth and love of God, these 10 commandments seem like an inconvenient hindrance to fulfilling their own agendas. So the 10 commandments are very inconvenient. They tell me sometimes things that I may be tempted to do. And the commandments say, no, you shall not do those things. The Bible says no other gods, but communism says there is no God. We will be saved through class warfare in the name of the proletariat. We will make everyone bow down to the vanguard of the revolution and the leaders of the oppressed. What about the third commandment? Don't do evil in God's name. Since communism denies that God exists, we might say that they're not doing evil in his name. But after the Bolshevik Revolution, after getting rid of thousands of observant Orthodox Church priests, the Soviets infiltrated the remaining churches with KGB-controlled priests who submitted their sermons to the Soviet government. In the following decades, the Soviet Union successfully infiltrated communist ideology into 352 different denominations and churches around the world through the World Council of Churches. These represent more than 500 million Christians, especially the Orthodox, Anglican, Baptist, Evangelical, Lutheran, Methodist, and United Churches. Without fail, these churches defend Soviet and CCP actions around the world and spread their propaganda. And it's happening right now. The same is true for the CCP-approved and controlled churches. In 2018, Pope Francis entered into an unpublished agreement with Communist China, giving it authority over whom could be appointed as Roman Catholic bishops in China. In that same year, the Chinese government ruled that all children in the nation under the age of 18 were prohibited from participating in religious activities. In 2019, Christian churches in China were ordered to take down displays of the 10 Commandments and replace them with quotes from Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. I believe there are about 200 or 300 million Christians, many of whom are underground in China. It's a pretty big estimated number. But there are those who go to the state-controlled churches. And if they do that, then they won't be arrested or sent to a prison camp. In 1932, a 13-year-old Russian boy named Pavlik Morozov was praised in the Soviet press as a martyr. He had denounced his father for hiding wheat from communist officials, which led to his father's imprisonment. Pavlik was in turn killed by his family relatives. Monuments to Pavlik were erected across the Soviet Union. He was listed in the Soviet Youth Pioneer Organization as Pioneer 001, an example of a youth who chose the state over his own father. So if you betray your family to the state, you might get your image on a postage stamp. To don't murder, communists say, why not? There's no God to stop us. To don't commit adultery, they say, why not? We want to abolish the family anyway. To don't steal, they say, our number one goal is to abolish private property. Everything belongs to the collective. To don't bear false witness, they say psychological warfare and lying are our best weapons. To don't covet, they say, since the Catholics got everything from our labor, we deserve to get everything they own. So basically, stealing, lying, and murdering are good if done for the revolution. 37,000 Americans died to liberate South Korea from communism. What if President Truman had decided not to get involved? Then communism would have taken over the whole Korean peninsula. What about National Socialism? There were real problems in Germany of the 1930s, but what was Hitler's prescription? And did it make things better or worse for the German people? Sometimes Hitler made references to God, but it was a God that endorsed the superiority of the Aryan race. Once he even said he wished that Islam had invaded all of Europe, because then the Germans, instead of being weakened by Christian ideas about love and forgiveness, would have conquered the world. What about the third commandment, don't do evil in God's name? In public speeches, Hitler portrayed himself and the Nazi movement as faithful Christians. In 1928, Hitler said in a speech, "We tolerate no one in our ranks who attacks the ideas of Christianity. In fact, our movement is Christian." But according to Joseph Goebbels, chief propagandist of the Nazi Party, Hitler hated Christianity. In an April 8, 1941 entry, Goebbels wrote, "He hates Christianity because it has crippled all that is noble in humanity." Though raised a Catholic, Hitler, quote, believed neither in God nor in conscience, but had contempt for its central teachings. In Hitler's eyes, Christianity was a religion fit only for slaves. He detested its ethics in particular. Its teaching was a rebellion against the natural law of selection through struggle and the survival of the fittest. Some Nazis, such as Hans Kerrl, who served as Hitler's Minister for Church Affairs, advocated positive Christianity. Kerrl accused dissident churchmen of failing to appreciate the Nazi doctrine of race, blood, and soil, and gave the following explanation of the Nazi concept of positive Christianity, telling a group of submissive clergy in 1937, quote, "Dr. Zollner and the Catholic Bishop of Munster, Count Galen, have tried to make clear to me that Christianity consists in faith in Christ as the Son of God. That makes me laugh. No, Christianity is not dependent upon the Apostles' Creed. True Christianity is represented by the party, and the German people are now called by the party, and especially the Führer, to a real Christianity. The Führer is the herald of a new revelation. Those of non-Aryan descent were expelled from the church, and many clergy, especially in annexed regions, were arrested or murdered. From the beginning in 1935, the Gestapo arrested and jailed over 2,720 clerics who were interned at Germany's Dachau concentration camp, leading to over 1,000 deaths of clergy. While a gas chamber was built in the main Dachau camp, it was reportedly never used for mass extermination. Instead, mass executions were carried out by shooting, and thousands of sick and weak prisoners were sent to the Hartheim Euthanasia Killing Center in Austria to be murdered with gas. Thousands of Soviet prisoners of war were also systematically executed by firing squad. Murders and persecutions galvanized leaders like Bishop Clemens von Galen to speak out more forthrightly. His sermons influenced the White Rose resistance movement of students in Munich, and in the city of Lübeck inspired three priests, Johannes Prosek, Eduard Müller, and Hermann Lang. With their Lutheran counterpart, Reverend Karl Friedrich Stellbrink, they were beheaded in 1943 after a show trial in a Nazi court. An estimated 3,000 Polish clergy were murdered, with at least 1,811 dying in concentration camps. In some dioceses, nearly half the priests were killed. Clergy in Germany and other occupied countries, France, the Netherlands, Czechoslovakia, Belgium, Italy, etc., were closely watched, frequently denounced, arrested, and sent to concentration camps, especially to the dedicated priest barracks in the Dachau camp. Protestant pastors who resisted the regime were also persecuted and killed, including figures like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Paul Schneider. Dr. Sung-Hong Lee, the director of the Unification Thought Institute, who also developed much of the Victory Over Communism education material, used in the VOC education conducted throughout the world, passed away in 1997. Young Soon Kim received Dr. Lee's messages from the spirit world in 1997 and again in 1998. In the 5th chapter, Dr. Lee described his meetings in the spiritual world with major world figures like Karl Marx, Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, Hideki Tojo, the leading general and 40th Prime Minister of Japan. Here is Dr. Lee's message from the spirit world when he made an effort to meet with Adolf Hitler. Quote, "Of all the murders of history, Hitler inflicted the cruelest slaughter. I witnessed a tremendous mass of people. All of them were bound in chains. I witnessed a tremendous mass of people, all of whom were bound in chains, shouting, 'Kill him, kill him.' The crowd was so vast, I could not see its end. They shouted, 'He slaughtered millions of people as if they were animals.' No matter how miserable a man's life can be on the earth, no scene that horrible could possibly take place on earth. I went into the crowd and met a young woman. She was slender and quite pretty. When I asked her how she was killed, she turned her head and asked me not to bring that up. So I approached the subject with the heart that God had conveyed. That moved her mind. She said that she was murdered as we see that person, Hitler, being murdered in the spirit world. What she meant was that she was naked when she was killed, and soldiers came and looked at her as much as they wanted. They put her into the gas chamber, and whenever we wanted to look at her, they opened the door and looked at her until she became unspeakably miserable. And then finally, they released the poison gas that killed her. What about the commandment, don't commit adultery? Nazi families were encouraged to have as many children as possible. But if it was an interracial marriage, there was strong pressure to divorce. Non-Aryan husbands were often sent to forced labor battalions. But being married to an Aryan was linked to a higher survival rate of the non-Aryan. There are also numerous cases of the children of interracial marriages being forcibly sterilized. Many Nazi leaders had mistresses on the side. Don't steal. Many Nazis became wealthy through the theft of jewelry, expensive art, other valuables from people who had been eliminated. Don't bear false witness. Blaming your political opponent for what you did is the best way to gain total power. One of the most infamous instances is the Reichstag fire of 1933. The Reichstag building in Berlin, home of the German parliament, was set ablaze late in the evening on February 27th, just 4 weeks after Adolf Hitler was appointed chancellor. Though he now headed the government, Hitler and his Nazi party did not yet have dictatorial power. Other parties still existed and sat in the parliament. What the Nazis needed was an excuse to crush their political opponents. The Reichstag fire gave them just what they needed. On April 29, 1945, 32,000 prisoners at the Dachau concentration camp were liberated by the 42nd and 45th Infantry Divisions. The 42nd was from New York. The 45th, composed of National Guard troops from Oklahoma, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, fought in over 500 days of combat in campaigns in Sicily, Italy, southern France, and Germany before liberating Dachau. You might think that fascism is something that would never happen here in the United States. But in December 2024, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down outside a Manhattan hotel. 6 weeks before, the father of two was executed. The suspect, Luigi Mangione, mused that the healthcare CEO, quote, had it coming. So if there's something you don't like in America, don't bother to dialogue and persuade people about your ideas. Just kill them to make things better. The killer, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, quickly achieved online celebrity status. A video projection of his face was cheered at a rock concert. He even had a meme coin created in his image. The fact that he'd acted as judge, jury, and executioner of the father of 2 children seemed to bother no one. Luigi didn't study how to improve healthcare and make effort to spread what he learned. He embodied a leftist fascist perspective that said capitalism, aka free enterprise, is evil, and that violence will solve the nation's problems by bringing about socialism. A poll of registered voters in America found that 41%, 4 out of 10, supported the assassination or were ambivalent about it. The younger the voter, the greater the support for political killings. 67% of voters aged 18 to 29 were supportive of or ambivalent about the execution, an indication that the lack of moral education in America's public education system has been very effective. Think about that. 2/3 of young voters, they either supported it or they were ambivalent. Meanwhile, in Minneapolis, Antifa-related graffiti called for murdering the police. We have to deal with the shocking fact toxic ideologies are persuading idealistic young adults that America is a bad, even evil place. On college campuses, those who just want to get drunk and party, they don't care. But the idealistic students are the vulnerable ones. We should talk with them. So I have a confession to make. I was on the left in college, okay. I drank this, I wasn't a hardcore leftist, but my understanding of the world was basically on the left. I had friends, this is during the Vietnam War, and one of my friends, who I think was a hardcore communist, he invited me to go with a group that was protesting at Sikorsky Aircraft in Stratford, Connecticut. And we blockaded the entrance to this, they make helicopters for the war in Vietnam. And we were all arrested. So, I have a prison record. Well, I didn't go I was arrested. I was convicted of, blocking the, the entrance. There are a lot of young people out there who, look, I had not researched deeply about Vietnam. I knew certain things. I didn't know that much about communism. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of idealistic young people. They're out there and they're demonstrating about various causes of the day. Most of them don't know they don't know anything, basically. They may have purple hair, whatever. It doesn't look. They need the truth. They need to know about the love and truth of God, right? Otherwise, we just make things worse. There's also the Aryan Freedom Network, whose headquarters are in DeKalb, Texas. It promotes the hardline white supremacist views, including neo-Nazism, racial separatism, and the Christian identity theology. The group's logo features the Totenkopf, or death's head imagery associated with Nazi Germany's SS units. The group is led by Dalton Henry Stout, also known as Brother Henry. You can see him there on the right. And Tonya Sue Berry, a couple described as racist royalty due to their family's deep involvement in Ku Klux Klan leadership. So I guess their ancestors were deep into the KKK and basically killing black people, something like that. Steve Carrillo, a member of the Bugala Boys, killed Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller, who's in the center, in front of the American flag, critically injured another deputy and threw pipe bombs at police on June 6, 2020. Before he was apprehended, Carrillo scrawled the word "boog" and, quote, "I became unreasonable" in blood on the hood of a car. Boog is short for Boogaloo, a far-right anti-government movement that began on the encrypted 4chan platform and aims to start a second American Civil War. In February 2022, he pleaded guilty to killing Sergeant Gutzwiller. Young men and women in America are being presented with a choice between left-wing fascism and right-wing fascism. Both lie to young people that their problems can be solved through destruction and murder. Like Cain, instead of doing the work of learning how to dominate their own destructive thoughts and emotions, they attribute their anger to something outside of themselves. It's true that anger can give you a rush of righteous power. Hatred can even become addictive. But they're giving up their God-given portion of responsibility to lead a life of value. Fortunately, there is another choice. It's what Father called headwing, which rejects both the rhetoric and the call to violence of the political right and left and begins with repentance.